am going to start our evening off, and I want to just start off by welcoming everybody to our first ever virtual fundraising event here at Pathways. We're really looking forward to this evening. We think we have an exciting evening planned with a virtual wine tasting and bourbon tasting with Grapevine Wines from Kirkwood. Diana and Mike are also on, and we'll be switching over to them shortly. We're going to try our best this evening to make sure we get through the evening without too many technical difficulties. Although Liz and I were joking earlier, with the two of us running it, we cannot guarantee anything when it comes to that. It's been quite a learning curve for us as we've put this event together virtually. So again, I really want to welcome you and thank you for your support of Pathways. This virtual wine tasting is our Care to Celebrate event. It's our third year of hosting Care to Celebrate, and it is one of our largest fundraisers for the year. So again, thank you for your support. I'd like to do just a quick overview of the evening for tonight. Once we get going here, I am going to mute all participants. But we do have a chat feature, so I really encourage you to use that chat feature. If you have questions about the wines, you have really questions about anything, just feel free to write a comment in the chat, and we'll watch that as the night goes on and answer any questions that we can.
And how do you use the chat?
There's a chat up in the button's up in there.
Yes,
You have to type in your.
The other pieces, Mike and Diana, as I said, are going to guide us through the evening. We've got several times where we'll be moving over to them, and they will walk us through the kits that all of you should have received today. I want to thank my staff here at Pathways. We had all 6 of us full-time staff out delivering kits today, door to door. So hopefully everybody got that and are settled with their kits. And thank you again to Grapevine Wines for putting together that package for us. All throughout the evening, Mike and Diana are going to be sharing highlights about the wine and about the winemaking process. And then you'll also be hearing from Pathway staff throughout the evening. So we'll be jumping on and sharing some information and just some stories and successes that have happened over this past year here at Pathways to Independence. I hope you are looking forward to and enjoying your evening, and I am actually going to turn it over to Mike and Diana now to start our virtual wine tasting.
Some cheese.
Sure.
Hi.
Yeah, my name again is Mike Gray, my wife Diana.
And we want to welcome you tonight. We're excited to be with you. Hopefully you have yourself all set up. Hopefully you have your charcuterie set out. I know you have that wonderful glass that Pathways gave you. You might want even to do 2 wine glasses if you have them available. You might want to kind of taste back and forth. Maybe you have a rocks glass. One any of these, people don't want to wait too long to get that first drink of wine. So we're going to start with the Gavi.
And Gavi is a wine from Italy. It is the name of the region in Italy. If you know the region Piedmont, it's a bigger region with which Gavi is a part of. But if you remember back in 2006, the Winter Olympics up in Torino, Italy, in the northwest corner, that is where this area is. You know, Piedmont is a big region. It makes these big, bold reds in areas like Barolo and Barbaresco. It makes Dolcettos and Barberas and Moscato d'Asti and is a region where they only make 1 wine and they only grow 1 grape, and it's a white grape. That's all they do. And so Gavi is not the most user-friendly term. In the United States, we'll use terms, you know, we'll list the grape name on the bottle, like Chardonnay, Cabernet, Merlot. This is actually a Cortese grape. It's the only grape that they grow in the area, and they make 1 wine. So there are 12 different growing regions or districts within the area of Gavi. And if you are growing your grapes in the area around the town of Gavi, you can actually call your wine a Gavi di Gavi or Gavi of Gavi. And that is what this wine is. It's a beautiful, crisp, light, bright white wine. It goes so perfectly with appetizers, with entrees, and I forgot to mute my way forward the phones. Yeah, and so the Italians are always making their wines very food friendly because they're always eating when they're drinking wine. So if you have a big bowl of pasta with Alfredo sauce and you're taking a big bite and that Alfredo sauce is just gumming up your taste buds, what you want to do is have a nice wine with good acidity that will cleanse your palate when you take a drink so you can taste that next bite of food.
Leave a little bit in your glass because we're going to pair it with something.
Yeah.
So try that, but leave a bit.
So it is, as I said, it's bright and crisp. It has nice citrus flavors to it, a little bit of apple and a little bit of minerality to it from the chalky soil that it grows in. In Europe, you often find, like in Bordeaux, France, in Burgundy, in Champagne, in Chianti, Italy, they call their wines by the regional name, not by the grape name. And they really don't care necessarily about what grape is grown in that soil. They just know that they've been growing that grape for hundreds of years. And regardless of what grape they feel is grown there, that's what the wine would taste like, because it's the soil that's giving it its flavors. So
This wine is $15.99. So it's a pandemic, so we're going to do dessert first. We're going backwards. If you've opened up that little chocolate bar, this is really going to be fun. So you've tasted that Gavi, hopefully. And now what I want you to do is take a little bit of that chocolate. So it's a white chocolate orange cayenne. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not that much of a white chocolate fan. And I never think of pairing chocolate with white wine. But put that on your tongue, let that melt a little bit, and then take a little sip of that wine. So appreciate those two together. I just think it's so fun because it brings out the citrus in the wine and in that chocolate. And that little bit of heat on the end, I just love. This brand is Jacoco, and this is an all-female owned company. It's part of Seattle Chocolate. And not only do I love their chocolates, but for every full-size bar, and they call this a full-size bar, so that would be 3 little bars, they give a fresh meal to a food pantry on the coast. So really cool company that produces great chocolate.
all woman owned.
Did I say that?
I
All
don't know.
female
I
owned.
don't
Maybe
know.
I did, maybe I didn't.
I was thinking
We
about
don't
this.
always listen to each other.
We don't.
So use that chat button. Tell us what you think of the wine. What do you think of the wine and chocolate? Love it, hate it?
I'm not a white chocolate eater typically, but with this wine, it just the wine just intensifies the flavor of the chocolate. It's really neat.
Mhm. So we'll be talking about those wine and food pairing concepts. So as Mike said, often you do something creamy with a really crisp wine. So you can either add a similar weight, a similar body to pair things together, like an earthy wine with mushrooms. Or sometimes you want it to cleanse your palate and be kind of the opposite. You can play around with things. So obviously the most important concept in pairing food and wine is if you don't like a wine, any better. So first of all, you have to like the wine and food, but then it's fun to appreciate the different characteristics of each.
Yeah.
I think we're good. I'm going to talk very quickly about Grapevine Wines. We're in downtown Kirkwood. We've been open about 25 years. We're in business with Mike's brother.
Right.
We're still a 1-location shop. We're in our 2nd location. We've gotten bigger, but we carry wine, spirits, some foods, accessories, and before too long, I hope you all can come in and see us.
Yeah.
We're still doing curbside only, trying to keep ourselves and our customers safe, but it's worked well.
So
Yeah. Next wine.
next wine. So we've done a lighter, crisp white. Now we're going to do a heavier white, a Chardonnay. And Chardonnay is still by far our biggest selling white wine. And I believe it's because it comes in so many different styles. It is the most manipulated grape that there is in the wine business. You can do so many things to it. And I need Chardonnay.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah.
So a couple of questions here. Someone said their bottle is different than theirs. I'm assuming it's the age. I'm not sure what that means.
Is it the bottle that
Oh,
they,
I do know what you mean.
Okay.
Yes. Pathways give you that little gift of that bottle of wine, and we could talk a little bit about it, but it's not part of tonight's tasting.
Yeah.
Feel free to open it, but it's not officially part of the tasting. It's a gift to you. People seem to really like the chocolate in the wine, which I'm glad about.
that's really good. So back to Chardonnay. Chardonnay, you can do so many things to it. You can drink it unoaked. Producers will also, at times, they'll ferment the wine, the Chardonnay, in oak barrels. Then they might even age the wine in oak barrels, which gives it a much more intense oaky flavor. Then there's a second fermentation in the wine business that you can put your Chardonnay through. It's called malolactic fermentation. It takes the malic acid in the wine and turns it into a lactic acid. And if you think of lactic, lactose, butter, creaminess, that's how you get that creamy butteriness in a Chardonnay. So this wine, Pacificana, it has a bit of oak. It's actually fermented in oak barrels, but they use used oak barrels that have been used numerous times. So it really doesn't give off as much oak, but it's got a little bit to it. And then the fruit, the apple and the pear really come through, and it's got a nice creamy texture to it. So it's fairly balanced, I would say. The French, they actually think that we have ruined the taste of Chardonnay because we manipulate it so much. What they will do, they will take all their Chardonnay, just take a small portion possibly, and put it through barrel aging. Then they'll take a small portion of it and put it through malolactic fermentation. Then they will blend it all together just to get subtle hints of the different influences, and it just adds different characteristics to it. They typically also use French oak, of course, which has much smaller pores. The wine doesn't get into the oak barrel nearly as much as a big poured
Missouri oak.
American oak barrel. So it's nice, it's wonderful. It's just got great texture to it, and it probably isn't the best food wine. I think it doesn't have the acidity that the Italian wine had. The Italians are always eating food when they drink wine. But I think it's a really nice Chardonnay, appealing to the masses. If you like a little oak, if you like a little creaminess, it's got everything.
So we're going to talk a little bit about food again. So that cheese that you have is made from by Milton Creamery. They are a smallish farmhouse producer in Iowa. They're a Mennonite family that were originally a dairy and then started to diversify by making cheese. They buy all from small local farms, mostly Amish or Mennonite. And this is an aged cheddar. So if you try this with the Chardonnay, I think it's a really fun example of pairing similar kind of fuller, richer, creamier.
Creaminess, yes.
Yeah, foods together, right? One of the things I love about a great aged cheddar, and this has a little bit of it, is a lot of them have these little crystals in them. And I just think they really add, I love the texture of it. The crystals are usually calcium lactate, and this has a little bit of that. So try the cheese with the wine, and then again, give us feedback. Not a Chard fan. So what's really funny is that we've been doing curbside, as I said, and people say, oh, I want 6 bottles of white. Well, Chard is fairly polarizing.
Yeah.
We're like, are you a full-on Chard or I don't do Chard kind of person? Some people love it. It's all they drink.
And then if they say, yes, I do like Chardonnay, you have to ask them, what style Chardonnay do you want? Because we want to get it right. We want to wow the customers so that they come back. But it is an interesting wine. And unoaked wines, completely unoaked Chardonnays are becoming very popular as well. We have a great one from Argentina.
I'm not a huge chard fan, but I really like it a lot better with the cheese, for me.
All right,
You
want
want
to
to
go
talk about corked?
to, we haven't done a screw cap yet, but that's when we, but yeah, okay, corked
Or
wine.
do you,
So corked,
temperature? Talk about temperature.
okay,
Talk about whatever you want.
I gotta know.
It's great working with your spouse.
Yeah. So corked wines. So the first two wines that we have come from with natural corks. The term, if your wine is corked, it means that it's gone bad before you ever open the bottle to some degree. So cork is a product that it's a bark on a tree. Typically it comes from Spain and Portugal. They're supposed to let it age for 10 years, and they strip the bark and then they make their corks. But at one point, wine got so popular that they were just stripping it much more quickly. They were trying to see what would happen at 7 years. And it didn't work so well. And wines would start to break down because the cork would break down, air would get down in and ruin your wine. They say, and my wife always says, who are they? And they are my experts. They say that 2 to 6% of all wines that come with a regular cork, a natural cork in it, can be ruined or corked to some degree before you ever open it. And so we really, if you're coming in for an anniversary bottle, we really kind of worry a little bit and it can happen to any wine, expensive, inexpensive. But you know, we don't want that one wine that you pick for your anniversary to be ruined because of the cork. That's why so many bottles are going to screw cap now, or synthetic cork. They're becoming much more popular. And years ago, people would scoff at it. They wouldn't want anything to do with a screw cap. Now people come in and say, I want 6 bottles of wine.
Only screw cap.
Only screw cap. And even corporate accounts. We do a lot of corporate accounts during the holidays.
Yeah.
And for many, many years, we just didn't want to include a cork or a screw cap bottle because we really didn't know if people would understand that good wine now comes in screw caps. Now, our corporate accounts, they really don't care. They know it. People, when they open the wine, it's going to be a nice wine.
Hopefully you don't see our screen flashing.
Yeah.
Someone's getting a ticket right outside our shop. So hopefully that
Excitement
flashing isn't going on.
Excitement in Kirkwood. So yeah.
All right. So yeah, some people liked the Chard, some people didn't. Everything's better with cheese. I got to agree with that. The Chardonnay is $11.99.
So that might be a good segue. Another thing that people had trouble getting comfortable with is the next wine, a rosé.
Can I one thing I meant to throw in, and I'm sorry.
Oh.
Last time somebody asked us if they should rinse their glass between wines,
yeah.
which is a really good question because we had done that quite a bit as we first started drinking more wine. Mike got totally chastised at a wine tasting.
When it was many years ago, almost when we first opened up, we went to this really nice wine tasting, all these different tables, different wineries all over tasting wines. And I walked up to one and I grabbed a water pitcher and I started rinsing. And this little old guy sitting on a stool in the corner says, "Son, you think all that water in your glass now is going to make my next wine taste better?" And he was mad. And I was like, "I'm sorry, I didn't know." But I've learned that it kind of makes sense because if you do rinse your glass and then you let that glass sit, all the residual water will fall down to the bottom and accumulate into a nice little taste. And if you're tasting just a small amount of wine, that amount of water can really impact the flavor. So if we go from white wine to red wine, we never rinse. If we go back to a white wine from a red, I rinse just because I don't want a blush color in my glass at the time. And then also, if you go to a sweet wine and then you go back to a dry wine, I try to rinse all that sugar out of the glass so that dry wine after the sweet wine doesn't taste so dry and bitter, basically. So yeah, so rinsing is not a good thing always. And if you come to a tasting someday at our shop, you can skip the rinse. So, okay,
Rosé.
moving on to rosé. So rosé has become so popular worldwide. It's just incredible how much more rosé we sell year after year after year. But 5 years ago, when we'd be doing a tasting, I'd take a rosé and begin to pour someone a taste of rosé, and they'd be like, "Stop! I don't like sweet wine." And we would have to convince them that rosé is not a sweet wine. So when you make wine, if you make a white wine, you take the grapes, you crush the grapes, and the juice falls down into the tank, and you take those skins and you throw them out. For a red wine, you take the grapes, you crush them, the juice falls down into the tank, and you take those skins and throw them down into the tank with the juice. And they begin to soak. And the longer they soak, the darker the wine becomes. They say that there's really only one red grape in the world. And people will say, wait a second, that's not right. Well, most red grapes that you and I are aware of, Merlot, Cabernet, Zinfandel, they're really white grapes with red skin. Alicante Boucher is the only red pulped grape that there is.
Use that at your next trivia night.
Yeah. So, so you let the skin sit down in the juice for about 2 weeks. Maceration is the process that they call it. And if you're going to make a rosé, you might only let the grape skins sit in the juice for 2 days, just to let it begin to get that nice blush salmon color that you see. We do have one rosé from South Africa. It's made from Petit Verdot. You can make rosé from almost any red grape that you want. Cabernet, Tempranillo, Pinot Noir, Grenache, Syrah, which is what this is. But our South African rosé is made from Petit Verdot. It is the darkest skinned grape that we know of, I think, and it only sits in the juice for about 2 hours. Otherwise, if they let it go any longer, it would be a light red wine, and that's not what they want. So, white Zinfandel, that's what people think they're drinking some of the time, and we have to convince them that's not it. We started drinking white Zin. That's how we got started in wine. That's how
big hair.
Yeah, our collars we'd put up and think we were really cool. But it got Americans to start drinking wine. So white Zin was great. But what they do with white Zin is when they take the skins off the juice, then they bottle the juice. And all that sugar is still in the juice. The yeast cells have not had a chance to eat all that sugar. For a rosé, they take the skins off and then they let it ferment all the way dry. Then they bottle it. So they are just beautiful. They are light. They're especially great in the summer. In the summer, if you are barbecuing a big steak and you think, I'm going to open up a nice big Cabernet with that, and you're sitting outside and you open it up, it just isn't refreshing. It just makes you feel more heavy. So if you drink something that has a little bit of that red flavor to it, that's chilled and refreshing, you just feel so much better. It is a wine that's definitely great in the summer, but more and more of our customers are drinking them year round, especially up to Thanksgiving.
So in the chat, Liz just asked if it's really a summer wine and you can drink, or if you can drink it all year long. And I am definitely one who will drink rosé all year long.
People wear white after Labor Day, don't they?
Well,
I mean, they do. Yeah.
All rules are off.
But Thanksgiving, your dinner table at Thanksgiving, there's just so many different flavors on the table, and it's just a beautiful wine. If you like that red, I mean, if you want to drink a nice white, like the Gavi we had, you can do that. But this is also a great alternative. Pinot Noir is a great alternative as well for Thanksgiving dinner.
And really,
it has good acidity as well.
People drink sparkling rosés all year long.
Oh.
So they're very similar in weight and body. You can absolutely drink rosés with Thanksgiving dinner, for New Year's Eve, for Easter.
You like those as well?
What? Sparkling? I love sparkling rosés.
She does.
Okay, so I just saw a comment from Lisa Hotley. I'm assuming, is that my friend, Lisa Hotley?
Well, Lisa Hotley.
Respond to me. Is that my friend? Hello?
How's Alan?
Yeah. let's see. I think it's about time that we could probably turn it back to Pathways. Pathways, are you ready for your first little bit there? So keep enjoying those first 3 wines while Pathways shares more about
Jody?
themselves.
Liz?
Okay, am I alive? Can you hear me? Okay, first of all, how about that Gavi Gavi? My favorite. I'm gonna get me several bottles and the chocolate, gotta have the chocolate. And I just love Mike and Diana and all the little tidbits they share. Because so often, if I've gone to different wine tastings, I don't remember what they say, but I'm gonna remember a lot of these little stories. I love it. Okay, well, I have to also thank you all for joining us tonight. I know Jody thanked you, but we all really appreciate it. You know, we weren't sure what we're going to do with this event, and we decided to do virtual, and it's pretty much an unknown, but I think it's, well, hopefully you all will think it turned out great. So we're just happy that you're here. So I'm getting ready to share a video so you can see and hear firsthand from our participant just what Pathways means to them. And a special little shout out to Sean Hotley. He's a videographer extraordinaire for helping us put it all together. And I will see you again in about 4 minutes. Four minutes and 10 seconds.
For the first few years after high school, making friends was very difficult for me. I didn't have very little skills, social skills. I didn't drive, and outside of work, I didn't interact with many people. My case manager recommended Pathways to Independence to my mother. My mom told me about it, and I was very excited to join. My first event as a member of Pathways to Independence was the holiday party in 2008. I had a great time, and I talked to a lot of people.
Bear with us. Jody, okay, I thought so. I just want to make sure. No, it's okay. I just wanted to make sure.
Whoever's playing the video needs to share their screen.
We were going to mention earlier that we were bound to have some technical difficulties.
Yeah,
It's a nice reflection of how hard our participants especially have worked the past 8 months or so to learn all of these new things. So this is really just an example of what things can happen on a virtual platform. We'll get it up and running for you in just a minute.
And I've been able to find my way to more activities.
I also love the social college program because I like to use my experiences, good and bad, to help other people. The social college, no matter the topic, is always a help to me. I like hearing about other people's social experiences too, and discussing them in classes. I learn what to do and what not to do from others.
But I'm big.
Because of Pathways, I am more independent, and the program has helped with the transition of moving to a new place. Pathways has been a stepping stone for a lot of other things. I am also involved in a lot of other organizations, and I feel like Pathways has given me the confidence to do that. I'm happier now than I have been in years. Thank you for supporting this organization that has done so much to improve my life and social network.
Small groups have helped me have more relationships with other participants. I find so many small groups that I don't need much help anymore. I practically plan them on my own. When I first started Pathways, I didn't want to call anybody because I was afraid they wouldn't remember me. Now I have friends in Pathways and they say, "Hey Brian, how are you?" And you know what? That makes me feel good. Since joining Pathways, I made some good friends. I feel more confident in myself. I feel comfortable asking questions and having conversations. I know how to start a conversation on my own without having to rely on the Pathways staff. I've also improved my budgeting skills. I know how to be safe with my money. I'm also better at budgeting my money so I don't overspend. Through Pathways, I've gained many skills and made a lot of friends. The staff at Pathways is very helpful, and they help me gain confidence in myself. Thank you again for supporting Pathways to Independence.
Oh my.
Liz, you are up.
Okay. So, wow. Honestly, that never gets old for me to watch. I love hearing from our participants and how Pathways has enhanced their lives. And as you were listening to Dave and Beth and Brian, you probably noticed some commonality in the things that they're talking about, particularly greater independence and deeper friendships. And Dave specifically talked about how when he graduated from high school, he lost some connections, some friendships, and he didn't have much of a social life aside from going to work. So we've heard similar stories from other participants and from parents, and that was a big discussion point during a recent strategic plan process that we went through about a year ago. And one of the initiatives of that process was to develop a young adult program for 16 and 17-year-olds. Now that program has been in the works since January, and we've recently launched it, just started activities last month, and we're really excited about that new offering. We're excited for the young adults that in hopes that they'll continue with Pathways after high school as well. And I think it'll be good for them, and it's good for our program as well. One other goal from our strategic planning was to increase the number of individuals that we serve. In fact, we're determined to double the number of individuals we serve over the next 3 years. And we've got plans in place to make this happen, but we could use your help too. Please keep sharing information about Pathways with family, friends, neighbors, coworkers. Honestly, you never know who might have a family member that could benefit and thrive from Pathways services. It's, the word of mouth. That's really what helps us the most, and we appreciate whoever you can tell about Pathways, and just keep us front of mind. That's really helpful. So feel free to watch this video whenever you need a little pick-me-up. I know that I do. It always puts a smile on my face. Now back to Mike and Diana, and we're gonna taste the reds.
So that was a wonderful video. It was really awesome to learn more about the incredible work that you and all your supporters do. We're very proud to be part of tonight.
We are. You want to talk about that?
Oh, that rosé was $10.99. I don't think we mentioned that.
Okay, we're going to move on to reds. So you'll know that in the instructions, you were instructed to put all of your wines in the fridge and then take your reds out sometime before the tasting tonight. Some people are appalled at the idea of refrigerating reds, but you'll have to remember, I tell all our customers at times, when they made the rule room temperature for red wine, it was hundreds of years ago. And the castles in Europe were cold and damp, and the wines down in the cellar were slightly chilled. Their idea of room temperature was more like 60 to 65 degrees, whereas ours is 70 to 75 degrees. So what you don't want is to drink a hot red or a warm red, because the alcohol hits you first, and you really want the fruit flavor in all wine to hit you first. So our first red is a great little wine. It's called Cuvée Jean Paul. It's from the area of Vaucluse, which is an area near the Rhone region over in the southeastern portion of France, down near Provence. The grapes that are in it are Grenache and Syrah, and you get nice blueberry and plum. Grenache is a lighter style red, and Syrah is a more medium bodied red, and they just blend beautifully. In that whole area on the eastern side, it seems, the Rhone region, Gard, that's where your rosé was from, same area, Grenache and Syrah. It's just a beautiful combination. If anyone knows Chateauneuf du Pape, they're the expensive Rhone wines. They are a blend of up to 13 different grapes, including white grapes, but the majority is always Grenache and Syrah.
So what you said is a really interesting analogy. So we just had two different wines that were made for similar wine or similar grapes. So this red, obviously, which tastes so different, is minted in a different style. So it's just fun to think of what the winemaker can do by how long they leave the skins on, what processes they use, because this tastes so different from the rosé.
Yeah, and so I always think about Rhone style wines, and this is a Rhone style, as being just a little bit heavier maybe than a Pinot Noir. So if you like Pinot Noir, this should be a nice wine for you as well. And it's got a little more flavor, a little more spice, a little more flavor. And where Pinot Noir is a wonderful Thanksgiving wine, this is another great Thanksgiving wine for your table as well. If you want a red. Turkey and ham are not heavy meats, and this is not a heavy red. You kind of want to balance the weight of your wine with the weight of your meal. So when, the old rule was white with fish, red with meat. You can have lighter style reds with fish if you like red wine. So you want to match the weight of the wine with the weight of the food.
I'm sorry, I was looking at the chat. We may have already discussed the other classic way to pair food and wine is by region. So if you look at the coastal regions of Italy, their wines are just gorgeous with seafood. If you go to Argentina, where they have lots of heavy beef, and you have that with that beautiful Malbec that Argentina is famous for, you'll find that so often the cheeses in the wine, the meat in the wine, the vegetables in the wine, or the styles of the region go really well. They've evolved together to complement each other.
Yeah, very much so. That's always a safe bet. If you're having empanadas, go with the Spanish red. It's easy.
So I just talked about pairing regions, but now I'm going to go to an Italian style meat. So we have that sliced caprese, and I really like cured meats with red wines. So they have a little more fattiness to them that help with the tannins in the wine. And that smokiness, I think, is really nice. So if you have any of that caprese left, try that with a little taste of this wine. It's really nice together.
It'll go great with the next red as well.
Well, and you could put a little piece of caprese around a little piece of cheese if you still have that left. Tasting pepper for sure, absolutely. So talk to us about what was your favorite of the first session, and then what you think of this. So yeah, this does have some nice spice to it, like you mentioned.
So one question we often get is about vintage and the importance of vintage. The vintage, the date on the bottle indicates basically at least 85% of the grapes that are in that bottle were picked in that year. You can blend in other years. If you have a year that was really great and you save some of that wine to blend into another year that wasn't so great, you can really build up the wine that way. And you say, well, what makes a great year and what makes a not so great year? The weather. The weather is so important. And what you want in a growing season is a long, warm, dry, growing season. And you can have that all summer long, possibly. And at the very end, it can begin to rain, or it can begin to look like it's going to rain. And the winemakers and the vineyard managers are going to have to get out there and decide, do we start picking now? Are the grapes ripe enough? You don't want that green vegetal flavor. Or do we let it rain, hope it doesn't rain very long, and those grapes dry up? Because if you have that warm, long growing season going, your grapes just start to shrink and become more and more concentrated in flavors and aromas. And if it then rains on you at the end, they just blow up like balloons, and you get watery grapes, and your flavors just aren't there. So every year is a different wine. And that's what we as a smaller wine shop in St. Louis and what other smaller wine shops bring to the table is that we will taste, we do it at least, 99% of the wines that are here. We taste them in order to sell them to you and know what they taste like.
Now you feel really bad for us, don't you? This is what we do at work every day.
There's a lot of bad wine that we taste. We do. At times you're like, oh my gosh, another rep comes in with wines to taste. But the real expensive wines, they don't always taste us on, so we have to go by reviews and things like that. But each wine, each vintage, it's different every year. And we will sell 100 cases of a wine, and if we don't like that next vintage, we won't bring a bottle in. I had a kid.
Yeah, tell about that kid.
That came in.
We're almost 60, so everyone under 50 is a kid.
Anybody in their 30s, 40s. We had a Cabernet, 20 bench Cabernet. I think we sold it for $16.99. We sold 120 cases of it. It was fantastic. New vintage came in. We tasted it. Never bought a bottle. A kid came in and said, hey, do you have 20 bench Cabernet? And I said, no, we loved that wine. We just didn't bring in the next vintage because we didn't like it. I said, but we have this wine in this price, that wine, this Cabernet, this Cabernet. He said, no, that's okay. Thanks very much. And he left. And it really was a little shocking because our customers typically, allow us to suggest wines to them. What do you like now? They'll say. About 2 weeks later, I was working, thankfully, and the kid walked back in and he said, hey, what Cabernets do you have between $15 and $20? And I said, well, we have this one and this one and this one and the same wines that I suggested the time before. He said, okay, I'll do that one and that one. And by the way, your competitor has the new vintage of 20 bench. It's not very good. And I said, see? He goes, I know. So that's what we bring to the table. That's what a smaller wine shop brings to the table. Otherwise, the grocery stores, the big box stores, they are authorized to carry a wine, and they will carry that same wine vintage after vintage after vintage, regardless of how good it is. Our reps will say, oh, just put it on the shelf. People know the name. They'll pick it up. It's not what we want to do. So vintage is totally, totally important in a wine.
So this wine that we've just been tasting is Jean Paul, and it is
$10.99.
$10.99 a bottle. Someone asked about the price of the next wine, which is a Petite Sirah, and it's $12.99. And we will. Somebody's been an overachiever, getting ahead of us.
So the next wine is
Shannon Ridge Petite Sirah.
Shannon Ridge Petite Sirah, one of our favorite wineries. So I'll start with a number of years ago. The national sales rep Brenda came into the shop, and she, really delightful woman, and she was telling us about their philosophy, the way they farm, the way they do things at Shannon Ridge. Shannon Ridge is up in Lake County, which is north of Napa Valley. So she said, when you have your vines and you have your fruit there, and the leaves on the vine are growing, they will tend to grow over the leaves or the grape bunch. So you need to prune them. You need to cut them back so the sun can beat down on that fruit and ripen. So at times, if you're pruning and you have clippers and you hit the grape bunch with your hand, you'll bruise that fruit and it's a loss. So what they do, they have sheep that roam around in the vineyards and they munch on the leaves and they don't eat the fruit. So she said, and we're up in Lake County, which is much more wild up there. So
How do they get the sheep from vineyard to vineyard?
oh, so okay, that's good. So they have herding dogs to herd their sheep from one vineyard to the next. And she said, we're up in Lake County. It's a little more wild. They need protection. The dogs do and the sheep do. And I said, protection from what? I said, coyote. And she said, oh yeah, coyote, but bear and mountain lion as well. So what they do is they have Great Pyrenees, these big white looking St. Bernard dogs that are living out there in the vineyards with the sheep, and they protect them from these animals. So she said, you need to come up. You need to see it for yourself. So this past January.
And if you invite us someplace, we'll come.
Oh yeah. So in January, we went out with another couple with friends. Brenda met us at the bottom of the mountain, basically led us up the mountain to their cabin where we were staying. On the stove, there was a pot of lamb stew waiting for us when we got there, and all these great wines. We did a little wine tasting with her, and just a really cool place. The next day, Shannon, she and her husband Clay own the winery. Angie and Brenda met us in their SUV. Their herding dog Lad was in the car with them, so we all hopped in. We take a tour of the vineyard and the sites, and it's all on top of the mountain. So you're looking at these incredible sites, and we came across a flock of sheep. Herd? Flock. Anyway.
Some sheep.
And so we all hop out. Angie says to the dog, bring him home, Lad. And the dog takes off at a sprint, just beats down the road and starts circling around behind them and begins to move back and forth, herding them back towards us.
And we could hear the sheep and we could hear Lad, but for a long time we couldn't see.
Yeah, they were down in this valley, I guess. And then all of a sudden, we're looking at the top of the hill and all these sheep start coming over at us. It was just the coolest. We got to see some of the Great Pyrenees as well. One in particular was her favorite, but he wouldn't come near us. The only time he ever gets close to a car, she says, is when he goes to the vet, and he hates the vet. So he kept backing off every time we get close to him. So it's a great winery. They make a wonderful Cabernet at $12.99. Their Sauvignon Blanc at $17.99 is just beautiful. They make a Cabernet Franc, high end, called Ovis. Cabernet Franc, you really need to be, it's one of the Bordeaux varietals, but you need to be careful when you buy Cabernet Franc because they can be a touch green, a touch vegetal. You need to get them ripe, and we taste lots of Cabernet Francs that just aren't there. This one is big and beautiful. We had it with our lamb stew. It's a really neat place. So this wine, full-bodied, blackberry, little smokiness to it, pepper, plum, just beautiful, big, rich flavor to it, and it just goes beautiful with lamb. It's got a little meatiness, little fullness to it that it goes great with beef, great with lamb, and just a wonderful wine.
Yeah. So if you haven't gotten into your little pot of deliciousness here, try it with the Petite Syrah. So this is by Red Camper, and it's their cherry fig mostarda. And so since we're having charcuterie, we're also not having jam, we're having mostarda, which is by definition a candied fruit with mustard syrup mixed in with it. I love this product.
Put it on the cheese.
Yeah.
It is amazing.
We have it in little jars, and people loved it so much with our events. We brought in big jars. I think it is so beautiful with this wine because the cherry and the fig just really bring out that dense fruitiness in the Petite Syrah. I think it's a really fun combo. As Mike said, I'd love it. Take a cracker, a piece of cheese. Hopefully you have all these components left. And then a little bit of that cherry fig, and then just wash it over with a little bit of wine, and I think you'll be happy.
And Petite Syrah is really gaining a lot in popularity, especially here in the United States, but it's relatively a rare grape. There's only like 10,000 acres of Petit Syrah planted in the entire world, 85% of which is in California. It's like becoming our grape in California. 15% of it is planted in Australia, and only 5% in the rest of the world. It's a French varietal. It originated in France, and very little of it is planted there. But it is dark and deep, and the color is just beautiful.
Yeah, if
It
you
goes
have
great
any
with
of
the
that
beef too, or the sausage.
of the Jean Claude, I don't know if you can see it. You can't see it well on the video, I don't think. But they're so different in their density and color.
Yeah, they love to have visitors up there. They are further north,
No, can't see it.
so it's not like Napa Valley, Highway 29. It's just winery, right? You know, boom, 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 going all the way up. But they will treat you well if you go up to visit. They're great people.
Okay, so feel free to tell us what you think about those wines. Somebody really liked the Shannon Ridge, great balance, tannins and spice. I absolutely agree with you. It's a favorite wine of ours. And then we will see you in a bit for bourbon, but I think we're about ready for Pathways to talk to you again.
All right. Hi, everybody. Thank you again for joining us tonight. A little while ago, you got to watch a video where you heard from some of our participants, but tonight I get to share a few success stories from the past few months. Our participants that we'll be talking about are joining me here on screen, so you'll see their faces. And one of the most rewarding parts about being involved with Pathways is seeing the growth and success of so many of our participants. During the past 8 months, we've all been faced with challenges that we never anticipated. But so many of our participants have found ways to find the silver lining and to thrive despite those challenges. The Pathways program and our virtual programming in particular has provided opportunities for our participants to engage with one another and with their community in new ways. So I'd like to tell you about a few of those successes. Jeff, our first individual over here, joined Pathways in 1995. Over the course of the last 25 years, Jeff has made close friendships and became part of a community that's accepting and comfortable for him. Before COVID, Jeff made his best effort to attend maybe 2 or 3 events a month, but his choices were often heavily limited by his work schedule at the hospital. Jeff's day begins very early in the morning. Getting to a Pathways event after a long day at work and then also getting home late could really be a challenge for Jeff and impacted what events he could choose to attend. Jeff and his family have expressed how beneficial the virtual programming has been for him during this time. Without the extra need to drive to and from events, Jeff is able to experience connection, have a positive social experience, and see his friends without sacrificing sleep or potential job performance. It's also allowed him to explore a wider variety of events and interests because of the ability to accommodate his schedule. We've seen Jeff thrive in the virtual space and have opportunities to continue working towards his personal goals while also strengthening or making new connections. Susie is another participant who's effectively used Pathways supports during COVID to find connections and success, this time through Pathways' new Community Connections program. This new one-to-one support helps participants identify and connect with existing community groups and helps them transition into those groups with the goal of participating independently. Several years ago, a group of young professionals from City Lights Church began volunteering at Pathways events. Last summer, a small group of participants requested to join their Bible study group for one of the evening sessions. One of these participants was Susie. As COVID began, Susie wanted to join a group to help her keep busy and connect with her spirituality during these really difficult times. Susie requested to work with program manager Jamie Larson and use the Community Connections program to find an appropriate outlet for this. Susie and Jamie learned that City Lights was offering virtual meetings, and over the course of a couple months, were able to identify and connect with some natural supports within the group. Susie's been able to work on skills such as identifying and communicating her unique needs and advocating for herself with others. She's now been participating with the Bible study group consistently and independently, and says she's made some wonderful new friends. Finally, I come to our friends Heath and Al. Virtual programming has also allowed for some unexpected friendships to form. such as the connection between these two individuals. Keith, a St. Louis County participant, and Al, who lives in the O'Fallon area, had crossed paths a couple of times, but didn't have a lot of opportunities to connect. Both participants are movie buffs, horror movies in particular, and enjoy giving a good performance. Over the past 7 or 8 months, both have actively participated in virtual programming and have been regulars at events such as virtual karaoke and movie night chats. Through these events, these two participants began seeing one another frequently online and making strong connections over their shared interests. During this time, both worked with staff to plan their first small group events, where they were able to choose the activity and who they wanted to invite. Al invited Heath to their event, and Heath invited Al to his. The frequency, intimacy, and virtual nature of these events has allowed a somewhat unlikely friendship to develop and thrive. Thank you to everybody for all of your support and for helping make stories like these possible. I'm going to send it back to Diana and Mike for the bourbon tasting.
Had to unmute. Okay. So bourbon. So some of you are excited at this point. I hope all of you are, but some of you may think, oh, I'm done. But just try it. We always try to get people to taste things that they're, not that are not in their comfort zone. So bourbon is a whiskey. There are many types of whiskeys. There's Japanese whiskey, there's Irish whiskey, there's Scotch whiskey, there's bourbon whiskey, there's rye whiskey, Canadian whiskey, all kinds of whiskeys. And what they all have in common is that they are distilled from a fermented mash bill, which is a combination of grains, and then aged in oak barrels. But there's all kinds of different rules for each different type of whiskey. The 4 grains that they can use in their grain mash that they mill into a flour, they add water, they cook it, they turn it into a distiller's beer, and then that's what they put into the still. There's 4 grains that you can use: corn, wheat, barley, and rye. Corn gives a whiskey sweetness, wheat gives it a softness to it, barley gives it kind of a broad shoulder body to it, and rye gives it a spiciness to it. And the rules, there's 2 big rules for bourbon. The first of which is that your grain mash or your grain mixture has to be at least 51% corn. That's what gives bourbon its sweetness, is the corn content. And although it has to be only 51% corn, typically it's more like 2/3, 65 to 75% corn is the ingredients. Then they add in their wheat and barley or their rye and barley. Typically you don't use all 4. Sometimes you do. But if it's a rye high content, like the Woodford Reserve that we're going to do, it gives it a more spiciness to it. So the second really important rule for bourbon is that when they age it in oak, like all whiskeys have in common, they're aged in oak barrels, it has to be aged in a brand new, never used before, American white oak charred barrel. And that white oak, a lot of it, most of it comes from the state of Missouri. The Independence Stay and Lath is in Lebanon, Missouri, and they are a huge outfit worldwide making barrels, but they produce a great majority of the barrels that are used for bourbon. There's another big place in Cuba, and there's a bunch of little places, but new oak barrels are kind of hard to come by because of the popularity right now of bourbon. One of the myths of bourbon that people think is the third rule is that it has to be made in Kentucky, and that is not true. America, the U.S. Congress in 1964 just declared bourbon to be an American product. You can make bourbon in any of the 50 states. And when I started doing bourbon classes, I don't know, 5 years ago,
10,
seven, maybe,
15,
yeah, time
while
flies.
ago.
You know, bourbon was getting big. There were only 16 states that were making bourbon at that time, Missouri being one of them. And today, all 50 states in the union make bourbon. It is so popular. It's really a fun product. It's been fun and it's been tough because there's a lot of bourbons that are very allocated and everybody calls. And we're not the biggest player, so we don't get all the allocated bourbons. But we sell a lot of different bourbons. We have a really nice selection. And Woodford is one of our favorite. Woodford, just to show you, you know, we talked about the grain mixture. The grain mash on Woodford is 72% corn, 10% barley, and 18% rye. So it does have a nice high rye component to it, which gives it a nice spiciness to it. You get a lot of vanilla, you get dried fruit flavors, chocolate, cinnamon, and that's the spiciness. You get wonderful flavors out of Woodford, and it's a really fun place to go to visit as well. Diane and I went on the Bourbon Trail, and again, Napa Valley, all the different wineries right in a row. When you go to the Bourbon Trail, they are really spread out quite a bit. So you do a lot of driving
through windy roads.
We had an appointment at Maker's Mark, and then we had another one. I forget where it was, but it wasn't good for us to do a tour at Woodford, but we thought we could stop. We had enough time to stop for lunch. They have a beautiful patio, great restaurant. The food was wonderful, and the people were so nice. We sat out there ordering, and our waitress said, "Oh, where you from?" And we said, "St. Louis." I said, "You know, do you like bourbon? Have you been here before?" I said, "Oh, we're in the wine business. You know, we sell bourbon, all that." She said, "Oh, have you done the tour?" And I said, "No, we haven't. We don't have time to do it." And she goes, "Oh, get your camera. Let's go." And she ran me around the distillery, hit all the hot spots. It's just a really neat place to go. And it's a unique distillery for bourbon. Typically, bourbon is distilled twice. When you distill things more than once, you take the best part of it, leave off the heads and the tails, they call it. You distill that, and then you leave off the heads and tails again, and that's what you use. You're taking the best portion of the first best cut. In Scotland, they do the same thing. They double distill. In Ireland, they triple distill. That's why they'll tell you that their whiskey is so smooth, because they take the best of the best of the best. And in Scotland, they'll use pot stills, which are copper, big white base, gooseneck goes up and the arm comes off. Very much of a batch process, more expensive process. What they use typically in Kentucky or in the United States to make bourbon is a column still. It's a very efficient, continuous process. It never stops, and they have a way of getting the heads and tails out, but it's not as much of a batch process, but very efficient. It's a really great way to make bourbon. The unique thing about Woodford Reserve, they not only triple distill, where most distilleries double distill, they actually use pot stills as well. So the quality is just there. And they triple distill, and it really comes out. And it's not that expensive compared to many bourbons that are getting more and more expensive because of the demand. Woodford's just a great quality product.
How much is that?
$35.99, $36.99, maybe, yeah. They make a double oak where they age it in the first barrel, and then they put it in the second brand new barrel, and it becomes really, really oaky as well. But
so when you drink bourbon, you can drink it neat, which just means you pour it in your glass and drink it at that room temperature. I typically like it with an ice cube in it. That kind of opens up the aromas and softens it a little bit. Some of you will like it different ways.
You can add a little water. If you go to Scotland, they'll say, "Oh yeah, add just a drop of water." It opens up, it breaks the surface and opens up the flavors and aromas. You don't want to use crushed ice because it melts so quickly. There are those big ice cube balls that melt very, very slowly. It gives a slight chill, which makes it a little more appealing or a little more approachable, I think. as well. But some people just, they like it neat. Our son,
Yeah, our
He likes it
kids, but our
Yeah.
daughter and our son would
Our s-
not put an ice cube in, and I'm the only one in the family that put an ice cube in my whiskey.
our daughter is the Scotch drinker. She loves
And of course, cocktails are so popular now. Everyone's using bourbons, ryes to make all these fun cocktails, especially now with fall coming. I'm thinking more of whiskey cocktails.
Yes.
If you haven't dug into your nuts and cherries, this would be a good time to do it because it'll go really well with this bourbon. I think they just really complement each other. A little bit of saltiness, a little bit of fruitiness. I think they're great together. Give us your questions.
So Woodford would be
Oh, I'm
considered
sorry.
a
Did I
small batch.
interrupt you?
No, not at all.
Oh.
I was just, anything?
Someone said, trust your wine dude. Thank you. You're right. Or dudette. What was your favorite pairing? What was your favorite wine or beverage from tonight? Someone asked if we have all the extras. And yes, indeed we do. We sell all of these products. Usually I say this later, and I think Pathways will sell it. But Pathways, for the next couple of days, I think it's on your instructions, will receive 10% of your wine, food, and accessory purchases if you let us know that you were associated with this event. And so, yes, we sell all the foods, all the wines. We absolutely sell
The Luxardo cherries that everyone loves.
yeah,
The vermouth.
the big ice cube balls. So yeah, you can give back again to Pathways through purchases. And did I just say this? It can be things you tasted tonight, or it can be any other wine, food, or accessory in the store, not just things you tasted tonight.
Yep.
Tip about Gavi with cheese is Love
What's
the
that?
Gavi and the chocolate. My wife loved the Shannon Ridge with the, right? Isn't that just so good?
It is so flavorful. And that Gavi, those are two of the opposite, the extremes. A light, crisp white and that big, rich red are just wonderful.
I don't know if we talked about this, but in our pre-COVID world, we do a wine and chocolate class. And so we do 5 different wines. On Valentine's, we did 6, I think, with this line of chocolate. So there's all kinds of ways to pair this fun chocolate line with wines.
I think that's all we have.
All righty, back to you.
Yep.
Thanks, Mike and Diana. I really appreciate all the insights you've given us tonight. It's been quite a fun-filled evening, and hopefully everybody's enjoyed their tasting kit so far. I did want to start to bring the evening to a close, but I wanted to do a little bit of highlighting about what Pathways and what our team here in particular has done in response to the COVID pandemic. And obviously you've heard some incredible success stories and some things that we have definitely learned about our organization and our participants over these last months, and the resilience of our participants to really engage in virtual programming. But it truly wouldn't have been possible without the incredible work of our program team here at Pathways. And so I'd like to just tell you a little bit about what our journey's been like since March, and where we're looking to for the future. And so, as all of you, I'm sure, remember, back in mid-March, we entered into a very unexpected quarantine for us here in the St. Louis community. And we were, full on programming yet in face-to-face. And all of a sudden that just came to a screeching halt for us. And here we truly just pivoted our programming within a 4-day time period. Our team here at Pathways had personally called all 140 of our participants with the goal to, one, just connect, check in how they were doing, but also we wanted to check what are the capabilities that they have in regards to accessing the technology that would be needed for us to pivot to a virtual program. What comfort level do they have in accessing it? So it's one thing to have the technology, it's another thing to know how to use it and engage with it. And then the other piece that we wanted to just check on was to see what kinds of ways they wanted us to continue to connect with them during this time. Since we didn't know at that point in time how long this was going to go on, we just jumped into it and decided we needed to continue to offer programming for our participants because we knew how vitally important that social connection was going to be. And so within that 4-day time period, we had connected with all of those participants and we created a brand new calendar of virtual events. And this was a brand new platform. We'd never done virtual programming in the past. And we were entering into an unknown like many people were at that time. And so we began offering that virtual programming right away at the end of March. And we have had some incredible success with our virtual programming. By April, we were operating 100% on our virtual platforms, and we were offering up to 40 events per month over multiple platforms for our participants to engage in. And so we were using Facebook and Google Meet, and then eventually added Zoom into our platform to be able to connect with our participants. In addition, our team did a lot of one-on-one coaching. They were reaching out to our participants and helping them on the technical side of how do you engage in these platforms and how do you connect with our virtual get-togethers. And so we spent a lot of the beginning part of the spring really honing what we were doing and how we were getting engaged with our participants. As the pandemic went along, we started to assess how are we going to start reconnecting with people and start doing a combination of events. So in July, we began offering some very limited small group activities where we were meeting in community parks throughout the St. Louis area with small groups of participants. It allowed us first really just to be able to be in the same space with one another, which was really important, is just to connect on that level. And we were also able to determine how well were we going to be able to implement protective processes to make sure that we weren't contributing to or spreading COVID. And so in July, we began that process and have slowly increased our face-to-face events out in the community. And over these last 8 months, it's been, a lot of, I think nonprofits probably slowed down in some ways if they weren't responding directly to the pandemic. And what we really saw here at Pathways is an increase in programming. We offered over 400 virtual opportunities over an 8-month time period and over 35 in-person events, which just began in July. And not only is that volume incredible, but the response from our participants has been astounding. We've had over 82% of our participants engage in our virtual and or in-person programming that we began here this summer. And we're continuing to connect with them. As we look into the fall and into the, I guess, almost into the winter, now we're starting to look at what are we going to do to continue to engage our participants in that personal face-to-face connection. And so we are going to begin starting some of our programming here back in our offices in very small groups and in very controlled settings. But we've also decided one of the things that we've learned through this is that we're going to be able to offer it in a dual platform. So we're going to not only offer the events in person, but we're also going to bring people virtually into the events. And so there'll be a combination of events moving forward beginning in November. So we're excited about those opportunities for us also. One of the pieces that we know with many of our participants, the social connection and interaction is so critical and vital. And during a pandemic, when you're oftentimes staying in your home, you're not able to connect in the same ways. And some of our participants truly have struggled during this time. And we've had to switch how we think about supporting some of our participants who are struggling on the mental health side of things. We've become a more constant one-on-one support in regards to phone calls and connecting, but we've also realized they struggle during this time. And it truly is because of events like this virtual wine tasting for us. You know, we didn't know how we were going to do this. And we really do thank Grapevine Wines for their support in helping us venture into this new arena. And I think we'll, fortunately or unfortunately, I'm not sure. I guess it depends upon where you sit. We're going to probably see more of this over the next few months as we continue on this journey together. But without your support tonight, we would not have had the success that we had. And it's because of all of you participating and our sponsors for the evening that we've been able to raise over $13,000 for Pathways in the support of our programs and services, which is truly incredible. And I cannot thank you enough for your help in getting us to reaching our goals. I think that Mike and Diana had already mentioned earlier, there will be a continued way to support Pathways as we move forward. There is a 10% of any purchases made between now and Monday that will come back to Pathways. So if there's something that you've really enjoyed tonight and want to go and give them a call and stop by and pick it up at their shop, they'll continue to support us in that effort. So I appreciate those opportunities from Grapevine Wines. That really kind of brings our evening to a close. Some of you may have noticed both Liz and I are at the office operating this event. And that's one of the other kind of final pieces that I thought I would share with you this evening is that not only during this crazy time of ours did we continue our programming, but switch how we did our programming. We actually moved our offices to a new location. And so after 25 years at our location in Clayton, we moved to a new office in Creve Coeur, which we are very, very excited about. And we're quite disappointed that we couldn't share it in the way that we had originally envisioned being able to share our new space with our participants and supporters. And so we look forward to the future when we can host events here and have people come by and see our new space, because it is truly an incredible new space for Pathways and some opportunities for programming here that we just would not have had at our old location. And for those of you that have traveled to our old location, you know what a hassle parking was, and that will no longer be an issue here. I think maybe our staff is most excited about that. And when we're all actually back in the office, meeting together every day, I'm sure we'll begin to appreciate that even more. So I don't know if Mike and Diana have any other kind of final words for the evening.
It's been a delight being with you. Thank you so much. It's been so fun learning more about your mission and all the wonderful work you do. And we look forward to working with you again.
Well, thank you, Mike and Diana. Thank you, everybody. I am going to once again attempt to share the new video with you. Hopefully this time I'm a little bit more successful at sharing it from the beginning. So I'm going to end our evening by closing out with sharing the video once again. And again, I thank everyone for attending.
Thank you.
For the first few years after high school, making friends was very difficult for me. I didn't have social skills. I didn't drive, and outside of work, I didn't interact with many people. My case manager recommended Pathways to Independence to my mother. My mom told me about it, and I was very excited to join. My first event as a member of Pathways to Independence was the holiday party in 2008. I had a great time, and I talked to a lot of people. At that moment, I knew that this was going to be a great experience for me. I felt this was a good chance to meet new people and to make new friendships. I've learned a lot since joining Pathways. Staff at Pathways taught me about appropriate topics to bring up in social situations with friends or acquaintances. This skill helps me with my job, knowing what kind of topics to bring up with customers and employees at Dearborn's. Another skill that I've developed is using technology in new ways. Morgan and Jamie introduced me to Google Maps. Since I've learned to use Google Maps, I've never gotten lost, and I've been able to find my way to more activities.
I also love the social college program because I like to use my experiences, good and bad, to help other people. The social college, no matter the topic, is always a help to me. I like hearing about other people's social experiences too, and discussing them in classes. I learn what to do and what not to do from others. Because of Pathways, I am more independent, and the program has helped with the transition of moving to a new place. Pathways has been a stepping stone for a lot of other things. I am also involved with other organizations, and I feel like Pathways has given me the confidence to do that. I'm happier now than I have been in years. Thank you for supporting this organization that has done so much to improve my life and social network.
Small groups have helped me have more relationships with other participants. I find so many small groups that I don't need much help anymore. I've practically planned them on my own. When I first started Pathways, I didn't want to call anybody because I was afraid they wouldn't remember me. Now I have friends in Pathways and they say, "Hey Brian, how are you?" And you know what? That makes me feel good. Since joining Pathways, I've made some good friends. I feel more confident in myself. I feel comfortable asking questions and having conversations. I know how to start a conversation on my own without having to rely on the Pathways staff. I've also improved my budgeting skills. I know how to be safe with my money. I'm also better at budgeting my money so I don't overspend. Through Pathways, I've gained many skills and made a lot of friends. The staff at Pathways is very helpful, and they help me gain confidence in myself. Thank you again for supporting Pathways to Independence.
Well, thank you, everybody, and I will wish you all a good night, and we will be in contact soon, I'm sure. Thank you, everyone, again for participating.